3rd, 2024. This is episode 88 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and I'm joined by Mike Koomar. Tonight, Mike and I will be recapping basically what we've missed over the last 2 weeks or so since our last episode, which was on the 18th. So, Mike, we're going to go kind of all the way back here. We're going to go all the way back to the CBS Sports Classic. We are going to pivot off of that. A couple teams had some notable games since then. But first, both games did not go how at least I thought.
No.
The underdogs won both of them here. The first one, we're going all the way back to the 21st here, actually. And it was North Carolina getting the victory against UCLA 76-74. The Bruins led by a bunch. The North Carolina came back, led by a bunch. But we talked about how important this victory was for the Tar Heels to close their non-conference season. Ian Jackson, their freshman, is starting to break out really with this game and has continued on since then. But, Mike, this was an extremely important one for North Carolina, especially now that we've known what's happened after.
Yeah, I think there's still so much concern about North Carolina. I don't think they're a tournament team right now. We're going to talk about them getting blasted against Louisville later, but this was a huge win for them. They didn't really have a quality win up until this point, but this was a good one. Game that really was back and forth. At one point, saw UNC have a pretty sizable lead in this game, but they were able to hold on a big UCLA charge back into this game and able to get the W. Big key for them in this game was Jackson had 24 points in this one. Ian Jackson has looked pretty good when he's gotten some minutes. Last few games, 24, 26, and 23. So the young freshman is really showing that he is probably the best player for the Tar Heels. You look on the flip side with UCLA, we see them get a good win later against Gonzaga, but certainly a little bit shocked about this game, and the polls let you know that this was not supposed to happen, and UCLA dropped for that win over Gonzaga.
And UCLA, Mike, they're in a fine spot. They still have a road win against Oregon. They beat Arizona on a neutral. Then they backed up that loss with a win against Gonzaga. So it's a one that you're going to be kicking yourselves from here if you're UCLA. But knowing that they did bounce back, I think it's a lot easier to say that we're not so worried about them. Gonzaga had a little bit of a interesting path to this game. But first, let's talk about the game. UCLA wins an absolute dogfight, 65-62. They seem to be getting a number of contributions from players. It was Bilodeau and Sebastian Mack who both had over 25 points in the loss to North Carolina. And then in the win here against Gonzaga, Daly leads the way with 18. You get Kobe Johnson with 12. It seems like UCLA has a lot of depth, and they can win a couple of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think UCLA showed that they had a lot of resilience in this game. This game was another one that was back and forth. It was tight the whole way, not an easy game. But at the end of the day, just came down to executing in the last minute of this game, gave UCLA the victory. I think on the flip side, you look at this one, you look at Gonzaga. You look at a team that has not been able to close out any tight games this year, maybe with the exception of Arizona State, which was the second game of the season. But since then, every single tight game they've lost. They lost to West Virginia in an overtime game at the Battle for Atlantis. And then they had an overtime game against Gonzaga. They were not able to come away with that one. Lost in the last couple minutes to UConn. And then this game where they were not able to execute well coming down the stretch. So I'm pretty concerned if I am Gonzaga now. I once thought they were perhaps the team to beat across the country, but they're not the team to beat in the last 2 minutes of a regular season game. That's for sure. And they're showing that. They had the lead in the last minute in this game after Nemhart made a jumper to go up by 2, but they were not able to close this game out. And so I am worried about Gonzaga's shot.
And they did have a little bit of a plane snafu coming in.
Scary.
Basically every news station picked it up, and so as they were landing and taxiing, another plane taking off was awfully close to hitting it. Now, I don't know how much the players on the plane actually knew about that, but it was before the game. So you have to wonder maybe if that could have played into it a little bit. We didn't learn about it until after, and again, we could just hear the pilots on the radio saying like
Yeah.
stop, stop, stop. I still you know
But
I
you
don't
never hear
I,
that.
I don't
That was
yeah
crazy.
I don't know the Gonzaga jet. If some jets you could probably hear what the pilots are saying, but I don't know if it really spooked them or not. But they end up with a loss. Mike, we did talk about the WCC being a little bit stronger than normal here. Gonzaga still has the strength of schedule. I'm not going to say that an at-large bid is at stake here, but
No.
a good bid is probably off the cards for Gonzaga here. Probably a protected seed might be out of reach now, especially with somebody is going to have to break out from this WCC, and with San Francisco, St. Mary's, and Washington State, the three other pretty good teams in that league already all having at least 3 losses. I'm not sure there's another game that Gonzaga is going to be underdogs in this year, and that's not really what they need for a top 4 seed and ultimately to keep that Sweet 16 streak alive. I know they did it last year with a 5 seed, but a little bit lucky with the 4 seed that they drew, and so the outlook on the season, Mike, is a little different for Gonzaga than it was last time.
And look, the one benefit they have, right? Washington State, Oregon State are generally better programs than most teams in the West Coast Conference. So you're getting 2 more teams that you have a better quality chance of, or better chance of getting a quality win in those 2 teams. So if they can continue to sustain their success that they've had, and they can win, I don't know, of their last 17 games, if they can win 16 or 15 of them, yeah, they'll probably be okay. But like you said, Sean, unless they win out and roll through their conference championship, I don't see them getting anything better than a 4 seed. Probably either anywhere between the 5 and the 7 range right now. It's kind of what it looks like, depending on how the rest of this season goes for them.
And Mike, the West Coast Conference isn't a true home and away, or maybe it is. It's 11 teams, so it is a true home and away. So they're going to have to play all of these good teams on the road. I don't think
on the road.
13-4, like that might be a good. They might be playing good basketball to be 13-4, 14-3. So I do think they'll win the conference still. I think they'll win the tournament still. It's still that funky format with a new team entering each day. And they essentially get to, be in the semifinals. But, Gonzaga might have to, they don't have – do they have they had like a funky game in the middle of the February non-conference last year. It doesn't look like that they have that this year either. So things might be a little different from Gonzaga than we thought just a little bit ago. All right, back to North Carolina here, Mike. They – as you mentioned, did follow up that win against UCLA with a bye-game victory against Campbell and then a tough 13-point loss on the road at the Yum Center against Louisville. Chucky Hepburn has his best game in Cardinal colors with 26. Ian Jackson continues to play well this time in the starting lineup for the Tar Heels with 23. But, Mike, with Louisville being a above-average ACC team, it comes down to the fact that North Carolina probably is going to lose enough of these games to where you're not comfortable come Selection Sunday. I mean, a loss on the road at Louisville isn't terrible, but with how few opportunities there are in this conference and them not coming particularly close, I think you'd have to have them on the outside right now looking in.
Yeah, they're absolutely on the outside looking in, and I think even Hubert Davis is probably starting to feel a little bit heat for his job. Look, since he's been the head coach of North Carolina, they went to the championship game that 1 year, but they have not had a solid regular season since he's been in control of the program. So a lot of concern right now for the Tar Heels. You look at this, they're now 8-6, 1-1 in conference, in a game that, look, let's be honest, they should have won this game. Louisville is a solid team when their players are healthy.
Yeah, they're down players, so.
Yeah, but they've got so many players that are hurt right now. This Louisville team is not that impressive. So for North Carolina to be struggling the way they are, we'll see what happens. The ACC, as we've talked about, is not a particularly strong conference this year. I think they've only got one ranked team right now. I think Duke is the only ranked team in the ACC. And
I mean, Clemson's just outside, but still, your point.
Clemson's a good team,
Yeah.
and Pitt is a good team. The jury's still out on SMU, but you look at these games, I don't think North Carolina has a whole lot of games that can really knock them into the tournament, with the exception of maybe the Duke Blue Devils. I believe they played them twice this year still. So other than that game, they're going to have to run the table in the ACC. They probably have to win 11 or 12 games to feel good about getting into the tournament, Sean.
Yeah, for a league that has, let's say, 3.5 bids right now, you feel good about Duke, you feel good about Clemson, and, Pitt and SMU are probably, 50% chance that both get in, 25% chance one gets in, 25% neither get in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 4 teams right now, and you're talking about North Carolina, a team that's been so inconsistent. You have to win those games against those teams, and then you have to beat everybody else too. I just think like these sorts of Louisville games, they're going to happen. There's a ton of teams like Louisville in this league.
Yeah.
Like all right teams, not tournament teams, not horrible losses, but not good ones either. And you think like the Wake Forest, Stanford, Boston College, Virginia. Like there's just a bunch of these okay to bad teams, and I think North Carolina has to be lumped into that sort of group right now.
Yeah, I think Tuesday is going to be a huge game for them. Tuesday they are at home against SMU. Like we said, SMU probably one of the better teams in the conference. They're probably a top 4 team in the conference. They're going to have them at home. They're going to have a really good chance to show who UNC basketball is this year. So I think that's going to be a huge litmus test for how the rest of the season is going to go for the Tar Heels.
Yep, it's certainly not looking good right now, but they do have the players where they could get really hot for a month, and then if that stretch can coincide with the tough part of their schedule, then maybe something works out. But I'd probably have it under 25% right now, Mike, that they make the tournament.
I agree.
And that is strictly on the fact that if they are close, they might get in with the name on their jersey.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, we're going to move on to another topic here. Slight one, won't take that long. But there was an MTE over the Christmas holiday. It was the Hawaiian Airlines Diamond Head Classic. The last time it'll be played in December. It is moving into Feast Week next year. With all the other tournaments, it will be like right around the Maui Invitational. I'm not sure the exact dates, but they just couldn't really get good teams to sign up for this. Nebraska goes as one of the as the only power conference team this year, and Mike, they do take care of business. They win 3 games. You got to give Fred Hoiberg and the Cornhuskers credit for going out there and winning all 3 of the games pretty handily.
Yeah, absolutely. Nebraska, I think, is a sneaky good team right now this year. They're 11-2, and they showed that they can go and it doesn't even matter on a neutral court. They took care of business in all 3 games. I think their closest win was 12 points in the championship game against Oregon, and it never really felt like they were in danger of losing that game. Yeah, it was a little bit back and forth, but really about the 10-minute mark in this game, you could tell that Nebraska rather was clearly the better team. Kind of I think bittersweet seeing this MTE roll to Feast Week. It's always cool to see this going on around Christmas time. But at the end of the day, and there's going to be 2 Hawaiian MTEs going on around the same time. I'm not sure the specific dates, but
I think Maui's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I think Diamond Head is going to be Tuesday or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But still, that's essentially the same time.
But I also think that's probably good for a team like University of Hawaii, right? This year they've got North Carolina rolling in. They'll be able to have teams for Hawaii to be able to get some good play in before they host Diamond Head. So good for the University of Hawaii. I think this is great. And they'll also be able to probably attract some better talent that Diamond Head really hasn't ever seen. Look, every year you see probably 1 to 2 teams that are in power conferences play. I think last year TCU was in
Yeah.
there. Drake was, I think, the winner. Obviously, Drake was pretty good last year. But finally, we'll be able to see hopefully a few ranked teams go to Diamond Head, because who doesn't want a nice trip to Hawaii in November?
And Mike, we did see, as you mentioned this year, North Carolina went down to play Hawaii first. I think
Yeah,
Hawaii's going to play a team from Maui first every year because
that's going to be like clockwork. Yeah,
Hawaii will play in Diamond Head, and then maybe you could see like some of the stuff we saw in the Bahamas this year with St. John's playing that extra game
yeah,
in Atlantis, but then they played their MT at Baha Mar. We might get some random games between Maui teams and Diamond Head teams. Like there's some possibilities for this to be pretty fun. The truth
yeah.
is that Diamond Head, unless you were a really big college basketball fan, which we are, you know, but still, like the names in the tournament didn't make us watch. We watched it because
Yeah.
one of the 4 games was on when you turned on the TV on Christmas, and you watch those games for a immediate timeout stretch. But
Exactly. People aren't excited about watching Oregon State and Nebraska, but they're going to be excited about the talent that's going to be coming to Diamond Head
no,
because of the move to an earlier window.
it is probably good in the long term, but at the end of the day, it is just a little bit sad that Christmas MT is going to be gone.
It's
All right,
gone.
Mike, we've got really 3 more things that I want to talk about in this video. First, we're going to go to the American Conference, which for the time being is going to be Memphis Tigers talk. They might win. They might win every game in this league. They did have that drop off when they lost to Arkansas State this year, but overall they've had a great year. Just 3 losses, 2 of them being to really good teams. Since Christmas, Mike, they beat Ole Miss handily at home. Chris Beard's running Rebs, and then they go on the road to what is probably going to be one of their tougher games in American Conference play, on the road at John Jacobs' Florida Atlantic Owls, and they win by 90-62.
Yeah.
Memphis is ranked. They're 11-3, with nobody else really anywhere close in the American. Memphis did their work in the non-con. You really have to like where your club is at here if you're Penny Hardaway.
Yeah, first of all, I think Florida Atlantic is, they got crushed in this game, but they're better than the record shows. They're not really a 500 team. They've had a lot of really, really tight games that did not go their way. But you look at the rest of the conference, and there's always a couple games that end up being a little closer than they probably should be. If I'm looking at Memphis' schedule, you look at, are they hosting they're going on the road to Temple. I think that's going to be a tougher game. And then Wichita State, they'll play them at home and on the road. I think playing in Wichita, Kansas is going to be a tough one. That's always a tough place to play. And Wichita State's been a lot better this year. But other than those 2 games, I don't see too many other teams that could really trip them up. There's always the onesie-twosies that happen, Sean. But Memphis is the clear-cut best team in the American. And it's a little disappointing that the American Conference is going to be so good this year. Obviously, you've seen some tough storylines to keep that from happening. With South Florida, their tragedy at the start of the year has probably derailed their season. But you'd love to see Memphis make a run at it after last year really falling flat on their face once they started American Conference play.
And Mike, it is January 3rd when we're recording this, but this is already bid Steeler watch in the American Conference tournament. There's one other team in the top 100 in Ken Palm in this league. That's North Texas. They're 80th. They're pretty good. But FAU is 3rd at 103. And FAU is a solid team, and we think that I still think they'll finish near the top of this league. But this FAU team being 3rd in this league is not a good sign for the rest of it. I mean, the middle of the pack teams here, Mike, are in the 150s. I mean, this is kind of a mid-major league again.
Yeah, it's sad to see, but at the end of the day, that's the reality right now, is that the American is just another mid-major this year. As disappointing as that is, it hasn't been like that for a long time, but sad.
Yeah, and look, Memphis has had a good enough non-conference season where they probably are okay if they do take a couple of typical Memphis letdown losses. As long as there's 2, is that number's 2 or 3 instead of 5 or 6, I think they'll be good. 4, 5, 6 seed, and and they're going to be a tough out because when those guards are up for it, they're as good as any. PJ Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter. I mean, we talked about these guys after Maui, Mike, and I'm not really sure if we've talked about them since, but Dane Dange's putting up crazy numbers for the minutes that he's playing. 24 minutes a game, like basically 12 and 7. And per 40 numbers were made for Dane Danger. He's never going to play 40 minutes, so don't even bother. But Haggerty still averaging over 20. Tyrese Hunter 16 a game. Like this Memphis team, I think a lot of people maybe thought that Maui stuff was a little bit fluky, but it's proven at least since that they're still a really good team.
I agree. Yeah, no, they're a good team. And I think in Maui we saw that they were going to be probably right now. I think they're probably a top 5 seed.
If the teams they beat don't fall off and they have good seasons, I think they'll be up there for sure.
They're going to be in good shape, and it looks. What's good about them is they've got a lot of players that have experience. We talk about Tyrese Hunter, 4 years at UT. Dane Danger has bounced around a little bit at Baylor and at Illinois, but he still put up crazy good numbers in the Big Ten tournament last year. He was the quintessential piece to Illinois running the table in the Big Ten tournament last year. So it was a really good team, and excited to see what Penny Hardaway's got going on after presumably being on the hot seat at the start of the season.
All right, Mike, we'll turn it over to the Big 12 quick here as we do want to keep this video a little bit shorter. Big 12 play did start this week. A number of home teams winning games. A couple of teams, or a lot of home teams won, yes, but a lot of favorites won, except for the Kansas Jayhawks. This upset, Mike, on the surface is certainly something, but once you dig into a couple of the things that happened here, it becomes an incredible upset. Before West Virginia even gets to Lawrence to play Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, they have some serious plane issues. They don't leave Morgantown until about midnight Eastern time. They get to Lawrence at 5:30-ish a.m. local time, and like this game was a 1 o'clock local tip.
Yeah,
that's crazy that they won first. And
unbelievable. They didn't even get like more than like an hour of sleep that night. They didn't even check on the hotel.
And Tucker DeVries, their best player, leading scorer, out. And Amani Hansberry, their third leading scorer, double-double machine, is out. So, granted, any time a team goes into the fog and wins, it's a big upset. But, Mike, this is one of the bigger upsets that we've seen since we started doing this podcast, all things considered. You got to give West Virginia credit. You got to get on Kansas a little bit for losing this game. But all of that into account, what an upset.
I mean, let's start with West Virginia. I mean, the character that they've got to have and the culture that they've got to have in that locker room to be able to not just show up to Lawrence, Kansas and roll over. You've got every excuse in the world to not play at the best of your abilities in that game. And they somehow come away with a win that they were dominating this game. Kansas got close at the end. Probably West Virginia got a little bit tired, and they were just barely able to hang on. But still, an incredible game. And look, let's be honest. West Virginia has well exceeded expectations this year in the Big 12. We saw them in the battle for Atlantis. They finished in third. They had a great win against Gonzaga. They beat Arizona, who's probably not as good as a team as we thought. But even in that Louisville game, that went into overtime. So this is a team that is clearly better than we thought they were. And I liked their chances of potentially making a run at the tournament after a crazy game like this. Look, there's still a long way to the season. And look, they did blow a pretty big lead in this one. But being able to come away with this win is incredible. And when you look at the numbers in this game, they just really held Kansas behind the arc. Kansas only shot 25%. They were only 38% from the field. And West Virginia only committed 6 turnovers in this game. So they played solid fundamental basketball in this one. West Virginia didn't shoot the ball great either, but they were able to get the job done in a thrilling upset in Allen Fieldhouse. Now, flip side, Kansas. Kansas has now lost 3 of their last 5. All games that they probably should have won. Missouri, they should have won. Creighton is not a very good team. They probably should have won that game in this one. Stunning upset at home. So I don't know what the story is with Kansas right now. but they can't be your favorite to win the Big 12, not how the season's gone for them.
And Mike, I want to go back to West Virginia just for a second because I do think there's a lot of praise that needs to go there. None of this was fluky at all.
No.
They're the better team. They didn't shoot it well, and they still were up for most of this game.
Made 6 threes in this game. That's it.
And it just, from watching West Virginia a handful of times, you've probably watched it more than I have, but it's just like good basketball that's kind of fun to watch. And I think when DeVries was hired, I don't think anybody really thought it was a bad hire, but like, all right, he was at Drake for so long, he did his thing. Like, I think everybody would have been I think West Virginia would have been okay if this season kind of didn't go well. Building the program, they didn't expect much coming in, and they're in a great spot. They're not into the NCAA tournament yet. I mean, we've played one conference game, but they did well enough in the non-conference where they don't have to have a crazy good season in the Big 12. And obviously you get what is widely considered as the toughest win in this league off the bat without your two best players. DeVries deserves a lot of credit. Their defense is awesome. Javon Small is awesome. He had 13, 11, and 6 here. Not his best offensive game, but he didn't come off the floor. He nearly had himself a triple-double, but when DeVries is in there, when Javon Small's in there, this team they're just good.
They are, and I will say there are a lot of skeptics, like you said, Sean, about that the head coaching hire and what a great job West Virginia has done under a first-year head coach, under a program that was kind of in shambles last year after the Bob Huggins dismissal before the start of the season. And I will say one thing about Kansas. They have tended to struggle in early games, typically their first game in conference at Allen Fieldhouse. Maybe it's just that not all the students are back in session, so they're not getting as good of a home crowd advantage at the Phog. But we have seen before Baylor beat them one time early in 2020 at home. Also, you saw last year TCU, who was definitely not as good of a team as Kansas, came on Allen Fieldhouse and dominated, won by double digits. So Kansas has had some of these concerns at this point in the season, but they've got a lot of work to do in order to be okay this year. Hunter Dickinson just did not have a very good game. It was just 4 of 10 shooting in this one. KJ Adams also had a really bad game in this one. Storr was in foul trouble. So this was just not a very good performance by Kansas. I'm concerned.
And Mike, those 3 losses that you mentioned, all very similar scripts. Fall behind big early, try and muster some kind of comeback, bring it back close. To their credit, they don't quit and roll over, but you can individually go into each one. Creighton finally had all their players back. They were in a desperate spot at home. Of course, they were going to punch first. Missouri in a rivalry game on a neutral or on the road. Again, they were being disrespected by many people going into that game. They punch first. That should never happen at home.
No.
Kansas is still the Super Bowl for a lot of these teams, but this is just not good for Kansas, Mike. And there are a couple other things that I saw. One, in the year 2024, Kansas was 20-13. That's just not that good.
No. Concerning last season and a half for the Kansas Jayhawks, that's for sure.
And Mike, after last season was over, we heard Bill Self was saying, I wanted this season to be over for months. I want to get, he didn't say it, but he wanted new players in there. It just seems like a very similar team to last year. You have Dickinson, Harris, Adams. Storr is doing absolutely nothing for them. He was an all-conference player at Wisconsin last year. He's doing nothing, 0 in this game. You've got Flory Badunga, who's a McDonald's All-American, not playing enough minutes on the bench because you have Dickinson and Adams. And then you have Rylan Griffin, who is an awesome player at Alabama, doing nothing. It's just not working for Kansas right now. And they're still a good team, and they still might have the best in-game coach in the country, but he might be taking them as far as this roster can go.
Yeah, I think it's concerning when you especially look at the lack of depth they have talent on this team, but this talent just isn't seeming to gel together. Like we said, AJ Storr not having a very good year. Fiore Baduga, he actually had a pretty solid game.
He's an awesome player.
8 points, 11 rebounds off the bench in just 17 minutes. You'd like to see them try to get him a little bit more involved in order to allow for more success. Look, Hunter Dickinson, we get it. He's the captain of the team. He's the backbone of the team. But we need to see Fiore get a little bit more minutes, and I think it's going to be more beneficial for Kansas if he does.
And from Bill Self's point of view, Mike, he does have 3 centers, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, and Badunga. And really the only game where he really let Flory go was that game where Dickinson got ejected for that flagrant 2. And
Kansas won.
Badunga may have been a good thing for them. Badunga was better than Dickinson was in that game. So, again, I don't think Kansas is a bad team. I think they're a good team, but in a league with a ton of good teams and a couple elite teams, I think they might just get dragged into the middle of the pack here. They have a road game against UCF up next. I mean, man, that is dangerous. UCF just went into Texas Tech and beat the Red Raiders. If Kansas does drop that one, which I believe they did last year, it was either the last time they went to Orlando, they lost, and I think it might happen again because UCF is just one of those teams that might be good enough to beat Kansas if they're not at their best.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see what happens in the Big 12. Right now, this is the worst the Big 12 has been in probably close to 10 years. But it certainly doesn't help that Kansas is not playing their best ball. It's still a good league. We've got probably 6 or 7 tournament teams this year, including Kansas. But the road's not going to get any easier for the Jayhawks going forward. It just won't.
I think Iowa State and Houston are the 2 elite teams in this league, and I do think they might separate themselves from the field a little bit here. I'm not sure, the good teams in this league, like your Baylor Bears, Kansas, I'm not sure they're going to win enough road games to really, I don't know if like a 14-4 is on the cards for those teams.
Yeah.
I think they'll probably be, 12-6, 11-7, good, certainly good records in a competitive league, but, the 15-3s and above might just be Iowa State and Houston. And there's a lot of ways the Big 12 can go this year, and I think you might be able to say that for a number of our conferences. But up next, Mike, one more game that we want to talk about here before we wrap up this video. It was last night. We're going out west to the ugliest court in college basketball, Illinois. 109, Oregon 77. Again, 2 really good teams here. I don't think it was super surprising that Illinois won this game, but the manner of it certainly was. Oregon has now lost 2 home games in conference after starting the year so great. But, Mike, Illinois, their offense clicks. Their defensive numbers are getting better. But to win this game by the margin that they did certainly sent a shockwave through really the whole sporting universe.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to win on the road against a top 10 team. It's another thing to win by 32 points. Look, you looked at the start of this game. Illinois actually started the game 0 for 7 from behind the arc. They then made 16 of their next 22 threes. And, yeah, they were a hot shooting team, but a lot of those shots, as you saw, Sean, were wide open looks that there's just no defender in front of the shooter. So, look, Illinois looked really, really good in this game. And you've got multiple guys in double figures. I think you've had 6 Illinois players double figures in this game. And if you're Oregon, very concerned that they've played their best basketball already this season. Illinois' got to be one of your favorites to win the conference right now, especially after that performance. They looked really good there. Wasn't so pretty in December. They kind of hung on to beat Missouri, but they also took number 1 Tennessee to the very end, and Tennessee had a buzzer beater to beat the Fighting Illini. So you like their chances of making a run at it in the Big Ten this year.
And the Big Ten, Mike, is a league that is just a total mess. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing in that there are a bunch of good teams in this league and maybe no elite teams like the Big 12, but I do think there's probably more tournament. This is going to be the league with the most tournament teams, either the Big Ten or the SEC. and Oregon might be finding themselves just dragged into that middle of the pack. Now, they still only have 2 losses, but I think everybody was seeing how lucky they were lucky to win all of their non-conference games. There's a bunch of close ones, a bunch of bounces, calls went their way, and typically this is the time of the year where those narratives start to turn around. Like, you see the luck factor tends to reverse course around now, maybe a couple more games in, but with how many solid teams are in the Big Ten, Oregon's certainly not the favorite anymore.
Not at all.
All right, Mike, well, that is all we have for them this video. A lot that we had to catch up on here. Obviously, more videos will be coming soon. Please check out our football videos if you haven't already. Previews and recaps for all the college football playoff games. And then upcoming soon is some of our season recaps. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.